something that we want for the future, which is critical, is the idea that we should be able to entertain the views of the other side, right? I think that is integral to sort of society's progress. And I think I'm a big advocate for that. Whether it's, tough conversations, like, I mean, we've made so many advances if we look at it on sort of the cultural stage, on sort of the progressive stage, right? So like when we look at, LGBTQ plus rights, right? These were, sadly, they were difficult conversations in the past, but we are so grateful to have had them, to have gotten us here. So whatever we think is difficult today, it is difficult, but I think we should still have those conversations. I think it goes both ways, if you get what I mean.
Hello, and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future and CEO of Spyder Works, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Adwet Sharma, a policy advisor at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario and a program editor and ambassador coordinator at the NATO Association of Canada. He recently graduated from the University of Toronto as a 2021 class valedictorian with an HBA specializing in international affairs and majoring in economics. Originally from India and having grown up in Germany and the UK, Adwet seeks to promote the importance of international perspectives and collaboration. In this regard, he is working with the U.S. Consulate General, Toronto, as part of their Next Generation Leaders Network. Adwet is a first in what I hope will be a long series of valedictorians on the show, both young and old, who will be able to share their experiences and insights about the world. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. So good morning, Adwet, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Sort of very excited to talk about the number of topics that I hope we touch upon. And I've gone over sort of your YouTube. I take the liberty. So you guys are having some very interesting conversations, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, thank you for that. And one of the things that we've wanted to do is to get valedictorians onto the show. It's amazing to hear how the next gen is thinking. We are called Say Hi to the Future. We'd like to know about the future in your words, in your eyes. And actually, we're going to open it up over time to people who've been valedictorians 10, 20 years ago to see how the world unfolded. So welcome, Mr. Valedictorian of 2021 for the University of Toronto. And tell us a little bit about becoming the valedictorian, what it's like during COVID.
That's a very good point, actually. And first of all, again, it's an honor to be a part of sort of this series, and I hope I can, sort of meet the bar and provide some insights or some pearls of wisdom. But yes, being a valedictorian in a pandemic, I think it was quite different. I remember even sort of I was looking forward to sort of writing my speech and my address, and I knew that it was going to be done virtually. So again, sort of very much like our call here, I was told, oh, everything can be edited. So, there was no stage fright or anything like that. So that was good. But at the same time, I wanted to work in humor. I wanted to be able to go up, on stage and speak in front of my classmates. Of course, none of that was possible. And at the same time, I think it was just that much more special. And this goes out to my sort of entire graduating class, not only of this year, but also the people who graduated last year as well. Graduating in a pandemic is very, very difficult. So to everyone who's made it, hats off to you. The idea that you're graduating at sort of 9 p.m. on, I don't know, a Tuesday night when you're done with your final exam or whatever it is, it's quite different to the normal that we've come to know. But yeah, it's great. It shows sort of the resilience and sort of, I think, the adaptability that we all need going into the future that we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a phrase you used in that speech. It's "Don't let society pass you by." It really stuck with me. Maybe you can, tell us a little bit more about what you were thinking in that moment.
Yes, of course. I am, of course, a student of international relations. I am in sort of diplomacy is what I sort of aspire to, get involved in. So I look at everything from that lens. And I feel that we live in a time where everything is just so quick, right? We have a 24-hour news cycle. Things are happening on the fly, and we have social media. We have all these sort of like just everything is just happening very quickly. And in this fast-paced time, it can sometimes feel that we're not as, what should I say? People become very numb over time, right? And I feel there's certainly a resentment almost amongst my generation, or at least people of my age, where they perhaps feel that they're not part of civic institutions, or they're not part of, let's say, governance, whether it be on the provincial, the federal level, or so on and so forth. So I just, encourage everyone to sort of just get involved, no matter at what level or whatever it is that you want to do. And once you sort of understand that you do have a sort of voice, and especially in a wonderful country like Canada, and I really do mean this, where people have easy access to those who are sort of, to sort of democratic leaders, or, to the halls of government. I think it's very, very important that we all become part of civic institutions and sort of shape our future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, as you were saying, to take matters into your own hands. And I do think that, it's funny how, I'll say, your generation or the millennial generation, Gen Z, gets knocked a little bit for not participating. But I actually see it the opposite way. I actually see your generation as having conversations that we never could. That through technology, I have 3 children in their 20s. They are just so aware of what's going on in the world, and they participate and partake, through technology in ways that, frankly, we just couldn't have imagined, when I was graduating university. So it seems to actually open up the opportunity rather than put a wall for you and your cohort.
I think that's a very good point. And sort of even like moving in, I know like in the, we've always sort of, there's always a saying, it's like, oh, well, people typically don't have access to information, they're not well informed. Yeah, you're right. You can't use that in today's day and age, right? Like, I mean, everything is sort of a few clicks away. At the same time, I also feel that there is like, it's like, when you open the gates, you open the floodgates. So all the information is coming in as well. So to your point, yes, I think we're very informed. I think we have very easy access to information. We just need to be able to sort of filter and, make sure we don't get overwhelmed. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. Filter, focus, and figure out what area it is that you want to impact. Now, so your resume, I've got to be honest, I mean, it's longer than some resumes of people 20, 30 years older. It's
too kind.
It's absolutely phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about what you're focusing on now. I mean, firstly, I'm seeing program editor and ambassador coordinator at the NATO Association of Canada. How fascinating must that be?
It is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm truly sort of passionate about this work without sounding cliche. Sort of growing up, I always, sort of looked up to diplomats. I would always see themselves as, preventing wars and whatnot. Of course, it's much more than that. But sort of as a result, I'd always been involved or always tried to be involved. And when I came here, again, I must refer back to what I mentioned earlier. There's so much opportunity here in Canada. It is wonderful. The fact that, someone like me can come here and through sort of sheer hard work, I can, I'm now sitting down with, ambassadors and high commissioners and working together, with high commissions and embassies to moderate discussions. It is a wonderful opportunity. It's a great learning process. And yeah, it's, I would say that the work that we do at the NATO Association, if you look at whether it's the articles that we're putting out, whether it's our research or just events we're putting on, what we try and do is we're really trying to connect sort of the average, Canadian to the idea of international security, because it seems like, these problems are a world away, right? But that's not true. So quite a few of the issues that we talk about at NATO, they're very much related to, culture and really our everyday life.
Yeah, and as you're talking about security, obviously there's that new level. I mean, what security for me 30 years ago was obviously peacetime, not technology, not what a country or a society or even an individual can do. in terms of wreaking havoc, if you will, over the internet. So are those all sorts of things that play into, sort of the new definition of security?
Certainly. I think what you've rightfully hinted at is cyberspace, right? And yes, we are now sort of seeing, at least in the sort of the international security context, without getting too technical, we are seeing sort of, we are seeing cases where most recently there was like an attack on a pipeline on a sort of natural energy provider, and that caused severe setbacks. Companies were, I believe, there was a company which had to pay ransom to be allowed to resume their facilities. So the conventional idea of war, or the conventional idea of what we call tangible security threats, is changing over time, and we need to be able to adapt as well. Previously, I think it was much easier in that whatever the opposition was or whatever the adversary was, if they had certain capabilities, you had to be able to match those capabilities. But how do you match a cyber attack? It's morally wrong to go out and do your own cyber attack. That's not the idea here. But at the same time, you want to build up sort of that technical expertise, those sort of institutional capabilities to be able to manage and prevent against such shocks.
Yeah, and when I look at your background, and now you're talking about international security and foreign policy, you had a bit of a circuitous voyage to Canada, I'd say, being born in India, growing up in Germany and the UK. Tell us a little bit about how you got here and why here.
Yeah, that's a very good question, one that I ask myself quite often. But yes, I have had quite the journey. I do feel that I've been privileged in that sort of I've grown up all around the world, primarily in England, but at the same time, even when I was in Germany or India and I'm here, these are completely different societies. Sort of, I like to think that they're completely different cultures. But at the end of the day, I think we have a shared understanding of the value of peace and security, and I think that really does sort of work to my understanding of international security. And how I sort of came here was actually really interesting, because sort of it was really like in England, I'd completed my high school and I was wondering where sort of to go next, and I'd never been to the Americas. And that's sort of my parents and I, we decided, okay, maybe it might be nice for me to go over the pond, as they say. But it's been wonderful. I think the stereotypes are all true. The Canadians are so nice. That was one of the first things I noticed as soon as I landed. And yeah, on this side of the Atlantic, everything is, I had a very sort of Eurocentric approach looking at things. But when I came over here, everything was spread out. Yeah, I was flabbergasted. You guys have drive-through ATMs. I've never seen one of those. So it was those little things. But yeah, it's been a great experience. And I think it's sort of, when I look back now that you put it, it's like, yeah, I don't know how I've sort of ended up here, but I have, and I'm all the more thankful for it.
Well, and from what I understand, I mean, it wasn't always the easiest journey. There was hardships, or there's financial hardships, and just talk a little bit about that, because I mean, somebody like myself speaking to you today, meeting you for the first time today, again, you've achieved so much in the 4 years of university. Talk about some of the hardships and, the passion or resilience that you must have had for what you're doing to be where you're at today.
Indeed. I mean, I'm one for, sort of honest conversations. And I think for me, like you mentioned, the financial considerations were substantial. I come from a family, my family comes from humble origins. So as I mentioned in my speech, that means I haven't had access to certain privileges. But one thing we've always valued is the importance of education, right? So I have an older sister. She went to Cambridge University, and sort of, I've sort of come here. And that's why one thing that we always knew was sort of education is a game changer, really. You could do, whether it's a certificate that you're doing, one degree, a few years at university, it is like an elevator up the socioeconomic ladder, this is the way I see it. And it was really, really hard for me at the start. So I remember, I'd attend my classes in the morning and I'd be done. And then at the end of the day, I'd be, going to the finance office to be figuring out how can I stay in university? So it was two completely different lives. As an international student, typically, people tend to assume that, you're sort of well-to-do and whatnot. And I was completely not part of that crowd. So it was very, very hard at the start, but I think that was sort of the silver lining. It gave rise to the sense of ruthless optimism within me, where I would and this took time, by the way. Like I remember for I would say my first year, my first 2 years in university, even, I would be, there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of anxiety, and that would transfer onto sort of my, academics. But over time, I really did learn to smile in the face of adversity. And it was like sort of, the obstacle is indeed the way, right? It's like, these are the cards you've been dealt. And at the end of the day, what you make of it is what you make of it. So over time, through of course, the support of my friends and family, this is not all me or anything. I was really able to persevere. And this is also because, of course, perseverance and all that good stuff and whatnot. But I also I was also able to find what I like to think are good distractions. Like for me at the start, I didn't know, whether like if I was going to complete my degree or not. So I was like, I'm going to treat every day as my last. I'm going to get involved here. I'm going to get involved with the governance of university, or I'm going to lead this club or work here or do that. I just wanted to get the most out of my sort of time. And I think that was sort of the silver lining. I think that really helped me out. And of course, the university was really, really supportive as well. They were very honest, of course, from the start, where international students, there's only so much that they can help out with. But they were very, very supportive. And through all these combined efforts, I was eventually able to complete my degree. And of course, with flying colors. So that's always good.
That is always good. And, when I listen to your story, and whether it's somebody like you or an entrepreneur who starts a business with nothing, there are always people along the way that have helped, that have provided support, provided guidance. Now, I'm guessing that somebody at some point in the last 3 or 4 years must have pointed you to your first opportunity to be involved. And what was that? And who, what type of person, and what was that first involvement that into, school politics or school clubs, if you will?
That's a very good point, actually, because most of the people who I've talked to, they also have that one person who that person might not even know who they are, but they were the first ones to point them in that direction. I had a friend of mine. He was why am I saying I had? We're still very good friends. But his name is Michael. And Michael was very self-involved in various levels. He had a very go-getter attitude. And I remember sort of just chatting to him in first year. We just run across each other. It was not even like a meeting, anything. And he pointed me, to this sort of first club. And that very day, I'd also joined another club, which was the Hindu Student Council, because I always felt that I was sort of growing up all over the world. I thought I never connected with my Indian culture back home. So I was like, I'll try and make most of that as well. I remember that day signing up for 2 clubs. It was that, and then it was like a political debate club. I think it just really started from there. And I always tell him this. I'm like, I really I have to thank you for this. And he was like, oh, well, I was like the recruiter. I tell everyone to join clubs. I'm like, I know, but I'm really glad that you sort of ran into me that day. And yeah, and I think the other person would be my sister. My sister has sort of gone through a lot of hardships as well in her time in university. And I'd say I had my sister to sort of, support me, and, tell me that everything was going to be all right, whereas she didn't have an elder sibling necessarily. So if she's watching this, creds to you. But yeah, so those are I think the 2 people I'd say that are up there. And of course, all my family and friends, please, nothing to take away from them.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And thanks for sharing that. I go back a little further than you, but I remember in grad school, I had this incredible professor in finance, and I took the class at night because he was managing partner of one of the biggest private equity advisors in Europe at the time. And it really struck me that somebody at his level was taking the time to give back. And not only in class, he really coached and mentored a number of us who had interests in what was going on. And between him and an undergrad prof who I'm still actually quite close to, it's just, I think it's important to take that step back and recognize, the moments that might change our lives, the people that might change our lives. Because the faster things go, the faster I think we forget to be grateful and forget to say thank you. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure your sister and Michael and your family will be very happy to hear about the part that they played as well.
Yeah, again, like it's so true, because I feel that again, there must be so many people who are part of, who shape us invariably, that we don't realize, because quite a bit of it is subconscious.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, how you mentioned about your professor, it's really the humble ones, right, that really stand out, whose sort of credentials speak for themselves, and you're like, wow, they're taking the time to talk to me. It's great. So that's very true. And I think, especially, I think we've already sort of touched upon in this conversation how everything is just so fast paced. So I kind of get when sometimes when people, are perhaps not as, how should I say, grateful. I think some people don't do it, out of they don't do it purposefully. They just perhaps don't have the time, or the things are just so fast, they're just trying to keep up.
So we've talked a little bit about NATO, and we've talked a little bit about your education. I see Queen's Park policy advisor. So how did your path get you to Queen's Park? And what did you do there? What did you see there in your experience?
Yeah, of course. I think politics is something that's always interested me. Again, as a part of just completely different political systems I've witnessed. And I remember even so when I was in England, I was, attracted to halls of Westminster and whatnot. So when I came here, my first year summer coincided with the provincial elections here in the province, and I just wanted to get involved. The way I thought it was, the way I'm probably like, I thought it was a golden opportunity. So I basically ended up joining a few clubs. I worked on both sides of the aisle, really. But when I started volunteering on campaigns, it was great, because quite a bit of it at the start was door knocking, which, people like, that's how canvassing is. But it really put me in touch with sort of, Canadians through and through. And I was able to like understand sort of their concerns. And I thought, like, whenever am I ever going to get the chance to talk to, I don't know, 15,000 people in the span of 2 months? Like, this is great. So I remember working on a provincial campaign back then, and that led on to my work as an office aide in an MPP's office. And then, of course, second year started, and then second year summer was the federal elections. I was like, oh, this is even better. And, like, I will work on a federal election too and see what the differences are. So I did that. I took the time, worked on that. And I think it was really towards like when I was no longer naive enough. I thought, or I'd like to think I had a firm understanding of what was really going on around me politically and sort of, in governance. I was like, all right, I think now I'm at a stage where I can step it up a bit. So it was really towards, third year had gone by then, and it was really towards the end of my third year where I was like, all right, now I think I can move up. So I transitioned from office aide to legislative assistant, and I started working on, drafting speeches and working on pieces of legislation, understanding how, stakeholder interactions are run within the government, and how this mammoth of a being that we look around is, how this entire thing really functions. And it's great. It's I think it was a great experience. And I know I have a very biased sort of outlook, but I would tell everyone to get involved. I think you can all learn from it, whether it's, local campaigns, no matter what your political leanings are. I think that's one of the great things that we have, right? Whatever you believe in, you can go work for it in a tangible way and have a good output. So yeah, and then after that, I started working on bits of policy here and there. So primarily, I think what I do, I think that's what your question is getting at, is I work on pieces of legislation. I work with ministries, parliamentary assistants, in really generating stakeholder support, and getting those legislation, those sort of prospective bills to the floor of Parliament, and then they're eventually debated and passed into legislation. So that's a bit of my work.
Well, that's amazing. And what I think is so important as a takeaway there, whether we're in politics or business or medicine or whatever it is we choose, is one, to be involved, and two, to get out and speak to people. It's amazing. I mean, yes, I know that we've done a lot of things virtually in the last 18 months, and a lot of our meetings are now on Zoom, and people are taking that as a great substitute. But I don't believe there's any substitute, when we're able to do it safely again, for getting out and speaking to people one-to-one to really understand what's on their minds. Because that to me is where you see whether it's opportunities or challenges to address. And again, whether it's politics, business, medicine, culture, sitting behind your computer for 20 years, I just don't believe it gives you the connectivity or the insights that you actually need to promote or push for whatever it is that you're working on.
Right. And we are social animals at the end of the day. I mean, nothing beats, in-person interaction.
Right.
And I think the past year and a half has really, really been a testament to that. Where, yes, I think I've seen in the field of course, international relations, diplomacy, I think, is also a field where, those interactions are very, very important, whether it's audiences with ambassadors or, sort of those events, which we no longer can do. So we have been forced to adapt, but again, goes to show how lucky we were, right? It's like when you don't have it is only when you realize the importance of it all.
Right. So as a young policy participant and somebody who's very involved through NATO and international thinking, what do you see for the future?
That is a big question.
It is a big question, but
yes,
I can see that you're a young but very, very big and bright thinker.
Oh, well, thank you. Again, you are too kind and your words mean a lot. I will keep that with me. What do I see for the future? One thing that I do see is, I would say, we're at a very interesting time in that, again, we've talked about how everyone has information. So people are very sort of well-informed in developing their views, which is great. But people are also very quick as well in developing their views. I just feel that, and I think I noticed this on this side of the Atlantic a bit more than I noticed this back in England, where there are certain, people can have certain disagreements, which is a good thing. But I think we want to be a bit kind in our criticisms therein. I think what I'm trying to get at is not obviously, of course, like free speech and all that good stuff, right? But I think what I'm trying to get at is we want something that we want for the future, which is critical, is the idea that we should be able to entertain the views of the other side, right? I think that is integral to sort of society's progress. And I think I'm a big, big advocate for that, whether it's, tough conversations. Like, I mean, we've made so many advances if we look at it on sort of the cultural stage, on sort of the progressive stage, right? So like when we look at, LGBTQ plus rights, right? These were, sadly, they were difficult conversations in the past, but we are so grateful to have had them, to have gotten us here. So whatever we think is difficult today, it is difficult, but I think we should still have those conversations. I think it goes both ways, if you get what I mean, right? So I just feel that that's one thing I feel that is integral for the future. And on top of that, what do I think the future has in store for us? I think at the rate at which we're going, I think we've been forced to look at a certain, like a plethora of issues. We've been forced to consider them very, very importantly. And I think that's a good thing. Like climate change, I think, that is now something that we're at a stage where we just have to take it into account. So I think that's great. And once we're sort of building, we're building sort of legitimate views on, like things like climate change. And when we have that sort of legitimate support, I think that's great for the future. I think that's what we need, because there's only so much politicians and government and institutions can push. If people don't believe in it, it's not going to happen at the end of the day. So I'd say that is obviously up there for me. And as long as we keep entertaining those difficult conversations and keep having those and keep entertaining the views of the other side, I think we're good. As a society, as a civilization, I think the future is going to be wonderful.
I think that's a wonderful message to end on, Adwet. I think the notion that it's about us. It's not about a few people in power or a few people at the top of companies or corporations, that we all need to be passionate. We all need to be inquisitive, empathetic, and above all kind. And that will give us a brighter future. So thank you so much for your time this morning, for joining.
No, thank you. It's been wonderful. And I hope I've been able to provide some insights, and thank you for sort of, just leading this conversation absolutely wonderfully.
Right. You are somebody I'm sure that we are going to be hearing a lot about. So again, congratulations.
I very much hope so. And I look forward to keeping you updated on my future endeavors.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.